two in the Solomon Islands.
About a week, yeah.
And what did you observe that surprised you?
Well, one thing that it didn't surprise me was actually how much it seemed like I expected. But one thing that did get me, I think, was as I said, if you go there and you say, okay, Australia, you've had the place for 30 years, what exactly have you done? I'm sure they can, the High Commission can put out a nice list of projects, et cetera, et cetera. But drive down the main road in Honiara and tell me what you think. It's supposedly it's being fixed and will be fixed in time for the games, but it's pretty rough. And if you get out of Honiara, the infrastructure is very bad. The roads are terrible. The electricity goes off every once in a while. Fortunately, it doesn't stay off for very long. And as I said, it's that hospital that really made an impression on me as a place where we could do an awful lot of good if you took like a tiny fraction of the trillion that we blew in Afghanistan with nothing to show for it. But also, you do got a sense, and this did surprise me because you never quite know. It was really just how um, I think much support there is for how much liking there is for the United States, and a real sense that, well, we'd like you to be here and do more. Where have you been? You did get a sort of a goodwill towards the U.S., a real sense that also that people don't want a one-party state where others are getting all the benefits from it. That was and the I was also impressed with we call it the fortitude of some of the reporters, some of the journalists that I met. These are people who are operating in a very difficult environment where there is actually risk to reporting. And that's often not recognized, that there's a thuggery that comes along with an administration like Sogavares. And there'll be, threats made to reporters if they write certain things, say certain things. And yet there's a very diligent and very tough um, bunch of journalists there, but they are beleaguered. And I was very impressed with those people. I mentioned the hospital, and the infrastructure is not good. But the staff, the local staff there, really just I thought manifested the best when it comes to the Hippocratic oath of actually trying to help people and do your best with what you have. I was very impressed with that. Uh, just one example that I would point out of the challenges that they face at the hospital is one of the doctors, one of the surgeons, was able to get a scholarship to go to sort of do an internship, short internship in the United States. But he cannot apply for a visa in Solomon Islands. He has to fly to Port Moresby, which is very expensive, because the embassy in Solomon Islands doesn't offer visa services, consular services like that. And that is and the embassy, the people there, they understand that problem, but they don't get the support, I gather, or I imagine, from Washington. And it's easier to make excuses than to actually do something. But this is an example of how just a little help can go a long way. Uh, but these are some of the things that really did impress me was really a sense that if the people just had a chance, if there's a chance for an honest government in Solomon Islands, I think they could really make something of it. And I, of course, was with the Marines for a long time, so Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal, Iron Bottom Sound have a particular meaning for me. And I got to go see some of the locations, such as Bloody Ridge, where the Marines hung on by their fingernails and sort of save things. And that makes an impression on you. But also the Marines would not have succeeded without the support of the Solomon Islanders during that fight. And yes, it was 75 years ago, but it's still within living memory for people my age. And in some ways, there's almost a moral obligation to at least show some interest in the place and apply some resources to it, and do something useful for it. And that was one of the impressions that I had of the place. But it is a place where you see the opportunity, and by doing just a few things, you can actually make a difference. What are those things? Well, we've touched on some of them. Go after the corruption, ensure that there are actual elections held. One idea is, fix fix the national hospital and make it work and keep running it. Make it a national project. Think about this. One thing in terms of having the money to spend on it, we've got the money. As I mentioned, we blew $1 trillion in Afghanistan with nothing to show. We could rebuild that hospital. We could give it everything it needs, equipment-wise, medicine-wise, all the support. You could have American doctors go out there, new doctors, and say serve 3 years and have your medical school loans paid off or written off. There's ways you could make this a very good operation. Get the Australians in, get the Japanese in on it, and then think about it. If you're in the Solomon Islands and somebody say makes you better, makes your relic, cures your relative, keeps you alive, you're going to think about them a certain way, and you're going to think about them differently than the people who built a few stadiums for games that were held 1 week and quickly go into disrepair. And this is such an obvious thing to do on just humanitarian grounds, political grounds, and for the people of the Solomon Islands, that it's certainly something that jumps out at me. And I've got a sort of a pretty strong belief that this is where some resources, the U.S. ought to apply some resources, and the payoff would be immense. And once you have a success somewhere, that tends to lead to successes elsewhere. Obviously, you need to spread the sort of medical care throughout the Solomons. That's where telemedicine can work, but also local clinics and facilities. Support those as well. The amount of money we're talking about couldn't be more than, I don't know, like a few days worth of Medicare fraud in the United States. It's not a whole lot of money. In fact, while I was in Solomon Islands, a congressional delegation came by, and it was on it was Representative Amata Radowagan from American Samoa, and also Representative Neil Dunn from Florida, who was actually a medical doctor. And he had a look at the hospital, and I'm sure he has some similar ideas as the ones that I had. But the diligence of the staff was really impressive. And as I mentioned earlier, the journalists that you talked to, some of the opposition people that have stuck around and are trying to sort of protect freedom in their country, that's impressive. To see that, because very often people who have the best opportunities will often head for somewhere else. But you see that a lot of them have stayed in Solomon Islands, and to try and get a sort of a better future for the country. So that was an impressive thing to see.
I was kind of shocked when you said that the US Embassy does not give visa services. Isn't that one of the basic things the embassy does?
Oh, that's crazy talk. No, that's what they're supposed to do. At least I always thought of it as an embassy gives visas. I'm sure in Washington that they can list all sorts of excuses why it can't be done. But think about it. If you're a local, if you're someone there and you want to go to America, the only people who can go are rich people or corrupt people. And boy, that sends a real good message. You have something similar in Tonga, where the Americans recently opened an embassy. They did, of course, at the opening on what you call it, the seal. They misspelled the name of the city, which I'm not making this up, but they too don't offer consular services. If you want a visa and you're in Tonga, you have to go to Fiji. The idea was, of course, that as part of the payback for the Tongans helping us out in Afghanistan, that they'd be able to get visas in Tonga. Well, that promise didn't last all that long. But it is something that needs done. And make no mistake, I would bet like all the money I have that the people in the U.S. Embassy in Honiara, they know very well. They would see me and raise me one, I'm sure, in terms of the importance of this. But you see just how hard it is to get the support they need from Washington. And once again, people in D.C. and State Department and elsewhere can rattle off any number of excuses why it's too hard why they can't do it. But they can do it, and they should do it. So it's an easy win. to do these sorts of things.
So the U.S. ambassador to the Solomon Islands can't just allow this kind of processing?
No, well, one, there isn't an ambassador yet. There's something called a charge d'affaires, who's the equivalent of the ambassador. But no, it's surprising just how uh, little clout that an ambassador actually has, and particularly when it's a place like Solomon Islands. That it, as I mentioned earlier, it's almost as if they're supposed to just get in line and take what we give you. All the while, they are watching this effort, this opportunity to try and arrest the loss of a country, a country turning into really a totalitarian one-party state. These simple things that you could do to say arrest it, they aren't given the resources that they need. And I say it's such a simple thing to do. And that is to just mention it. That one thing you notice, and say as I've been around DC a fair amount, and actually used to work for State Department, that you often find that nobody's really responsible for what happens somewhere. And I would choose Solomon Islands, and I would say the larger Pacific, that at a certain level, and this would be back in Washington, because make no mistake, everybody in an embassy takes this seriously and does their best. But at a certain level at the management, that nobody's responsible for the success or failure of American policy in the region. So if it succeeds, they'll of course take credit for it. But if things don't happen, nothing much happens, well, they'll just go along to their next assignment, eventually retire, move to a think tank. But there's no downside to actually not succeeding, not producing. And there's plenty of people who will go to meetings and will go on junkets and say we're back, we're stepping up our game, etc. But they don't really have any responsibility, as I said, for the success or failure of the policy or what we're doing out there. And you see this play out in the Solomons like it does in a lot of other places. Unfortunately, it sounds a little cynical, but I think you reach a point at which you, I think, can make that observation with some accuracy.
So I guess my question would be, how can I get one of these lucrative jobs in the U.S. government where I have no responsibilities?
Pass the
It's
foreign
like
service exam and get promoted about 10 times.
it's
No, I'm
like the
being a
worst
little
part.
cynical.
You get promoted when you fail, right? You fail up.
Oh, well, that
That's how I
applies.
understand.
Well, the military could see you on that one as well, with this 20 years of success in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you'd think everybody won the war 20 times. It's part of the deal. But every once in a while, there's plenty of people around, and you'll get enough of them together, lined up, who want to get something done, and they just want to get it done and to do something good. And that's why you always have a little optimism that somebody's going to make it their thing. As I said, for example, rebuild that hospital in Solomon Islands. They're going to make it their thing, and they're going to get all the necessary parties together to get it done.